Millionaire entrepreneur Dick Smith has criticised the ABC, telling Fairfax Papers that the broadcaster has ignored his campaign for lowering immigration. Mr Smith has been campaigning for a while for lowering immigration and wants the major parties to back him, saying only one nation has similar policies.
70,000 a year, which was the long-term average, is an incredibly high number of immigrants coming in. We can have 70,000 a year and level off our population under 30 million. The 8 out of the 10 wealthiest countries on earth have less than 10 million. We're on our way to 100 million people. Yeah, possible, but 30 million will be incredibly poor, like in America.
The entrepreneur has posted on his Facebook page that politicians are too scared that the ABC might accuse them of racism to talk about a population plan for Australia. The ABC has responded by saying it has no ban or position on reporting population growth and has frequently reported Mr Smith's views. Mark Kenny, can you talk to the suggestion of Mr Smith that he has strong or significant support within the major parties for his views, but he believes them too frightened to speak out?
Well, I can't attest to that, obviously. I mean, we know that there have been significant personalities on both sides of politics in the past who've at least raised this question about the size of Australia. We know Kevin Rudd at one stage was talking about a big Australia. Bob Carr, as a former Foreign Minister, former New South Wales Premier, had different views about it. Often when this debate comes up, we hear quite impassioned pleas about infrastructure and housing pressure within the major cities. You know, Sydney is full, this kind of thing. So it's a pretty incendiary sort of debate. And I'm sure there are politicians right across the board who have views about this, and probably to this extent Dick Smith is correct that some people, it is a very fraught area of public policy to stray into because you are so easily misrepresented or categorised, and so some people perhaps aren't speaking about it. But we know there is a party that speaks pretty stridently about immigration matters. That's One Nation, and Dick Smith has given them some succor in this process. I guess he can live with that. I'm not so sure I'd be happy about it.
Yes, and the interesting contradiction, of course, is Mr Smith saying that his money will end up supporting or getting One Nation candidates elected, but he wouldn't vote for them himself because he disagrees with some of their views. Now, what, Alan, do you make of his attempt to have a debate in this fashion through an ad campaign? Will this be effective?
I think his stunt today has been incredibly effective. I didn't know about this campaign until the whole story broke about the ABC banning him. So I think that's been brilliant.
This is
PR.
really bad messaging, actually. Take the ABC out, yeah.
And he's getting a great little run right now on the ABC. But I think it's...
we are open to these discussions.
But look, maybe one of the reasons the ABC and indeed all the other media outlets that I absorb every day have not covered this to date is because it's not a really well-founded argument. And if you look at migration, predominantly people who arrive here are better educated than the rest of us. Their kids do better at school. They're generally of workforce age, so they have this sort of impact on the population of giving us more people in the workforce, which delays the impact of an ageing population. So we're getting a lot out of migration at the moment. It's geared predominantly towards delivering what employers need, and that's what fuels the economy. And it's been one of the most consistent forces driving economic growth in Australia decade upon decade. So, you know, I just don't think it's a really strong argument. Maybe that's why it hasn't been a story until the ABC angle.
Don't you think we should always be talking about what's sustainable from an economic view as well as what fuels our economy, and whether we need to be talking about tinkering with levels of humanitarian and general immigration intake, which is what he's doing?
We absolutely need to have this debate because I guess the missing piece has been the population has grown and that has fueled economic growth, but we've really dropped the ball on infrastructure and on housing in particular. So people are actually feeling real pressure. That's why we've got an issue with housing affordability. It's one of the key factors. We haven't really dealt with the infrastructure needs in terms of transport in our major cities, which is one of the factors that Bob Carr has called out in this debate. So there is actually value in calling out this debate, but I think we're actually focusing on the wrong solution. Cutting immigration won't do it. We just need to plan better for the impacts of immigration on demand for services.
Georgina, have we really got to the point? As you know, you come on the drum often and we like to talk about everything, including older people having sex, to the delight of most of our panellists this evening. That's coming up. But have we really reached a point? do you think, where we can have, you know, public figures saying they have to hold their views about adjusting levels of migration in private because they fear being castigated if they speak about it in public?
I'd like to think that that wasn't the case, but I'm sure that is. I mean, I think it's a little bit
Why?
rich for Dick Smith to say he's been ignored. I think the way he has pitched his whole argument is around immigration being incredibly damaging to people's sense of equality in our society, and it just hasn't rung true for most people. I think, as one of your guests tonight was explaining, the immigration story is one of highly skilled immigrants coming here and contributing to economic growth, but the problems we're experiencing with immigration come with lack of investment in infrastructure. Now, I think there are some, certainly on my side of the political fence, who would share the concerns about the level at the moment. 190,000, I think, last year coming into Australia. It's very high historically speaking, and there probably is a bit of concern that if you start talking about reducing those numbers, are you considered to be one of those who's saying, no, we're shutting up, it's Fortress Australia, we're shutting up shop, we don't want any foreigners here. We need to find a way in Australia of having mature debates that don't sort of suddenly become beholden to identity politics and us against them. It's about long-term national planning and working out what's in the best interests of Australians for Australia.
This was always supposedly the dividend from having an orderly migration policy. John Howard used to say if you can control your borders and control your intake of immigration, you can actually have a very high intake of skilled and unskilled migration through the humanitarian side, and that's what Australia has done. That's what the government claims to have done, and so I suppose we're seeing the policy play out now, where the policy is under the control of the government. There is no high level of public disquiet about this. Obviously, Dick Smith's looking to drum up a bit of it, and One Nation's looking to drum up a bit of it. But I think, generally speaking, there's a fairly high level of acceptance. I mean, we are, after all, an immigrant nation, and you only have to look at the Parliament and see how many people have dual citizenship at the moment, and you realise that not that many people, can draw their roots sort of generationally back too far in this country.
Yes.
But I think Peter Dutton has expanded the debate to talk about values, and while we've been blessed with hundreds of thousands of skilled migrants coming to Australia, we do need to make sure that the values that Australia holds dear are shared by those seeking to come to our country, and that's been an important part of the debate that has been opened up in the last 6 to 12 months.
Toby, have you got something to declare regarding citizenship, or...?
Well, I hold 2 passports.
Lucky you.
I can't be a parliamentarian.
That was always an object of envy, wasn't it?
Nobody would vote for me anyway. So with Dick Smith, I disagree with what he's saying, but I like the fact that he's saying it and raising the debate. I think that's a good, positive thing. I'm very concerned that he's a guy who won't vote for a party that he's about to give $2 million to. And that seems to me a contradiction that you can't really move past. I think he needs a nice long lie down and a think about that.
Well, the question is how effective that's going to be in marshalling support for his cause.
Well, I suspect if he tips in $2 million, it'll be very effective. I suspect it will.
For One Nation.
For One Nation, and therefore deliver some influence and scare major parties and make it a thing that they have to deal with.
But what's his beef with the ABC, really? It seems to me that that's probably just part of the stunt to get the thing discussed. And he might be doing advertising. The ABC doesn't accept advertising. Is that his complaint?
It says on my ABC briefing note here that it is a stunt.
Nice try. Let's see what it says about our last segment. All right, now to